be back with so many patriots dedicated to faith and freedom and the road to the majority. And I want to thank my friend Ralph Reed for those overly generous words. I'm deeply humbled by them. Ralph Reed knows me well enough to know the introduction I prefer is a little bit short. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order, and I am honored to stand before you.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And I'm humbled to share the podium today with so many great leaders. Has this been a great morning or what? I'm also honored to be here with so many pillars of the American faith community. Thank you for your ministries. I'll always believe that
was interesting.
No podium that those of us in elected office ever stand behind. That will be more important to the life of the nation than the pulpits that you stand behind. And we thank you for your ministry in the cause of Christ. And finally, it's a special joy for me to be here today with a Marine Corps mom, a Christian school teacher, a champion of military families, a new grandmother, and my wife of 36 years, the best second lady this country has ever had. You join me.
They're escorting people out that were just yelling at them.
We came here today really for two reasons. First and foremost, we wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your support over the past 40 years. And thank you for your prayers. I can tell you the sweetest words we ever heard for the last 4 years when people would stop and say, I'm praying for you. And we heard it all the time. There never was a day that Karen and I didn't feel the prayers of faithful Americans. And we thank you for it. And let me also say, thank you for the privilege of serving as your vice president with President Donald Trump. It was the greatest honor of my life. And secondly, after 140 days, the Biden administration and Washington Democrats pushing open borders, higher taxes, runaway spending, defunding the police, abortion on demand, censoring free speech, canceling our most cherished liberties, the time has come for every American dedicated to faith and freedom to stand up and be heard and turn back the agenda of the radical left. The time has come to end Democrat majorities on Capitol Hill, and the road to majority starts right here and right now. You know, over the past 4 years, President Trump taught us what Republicans can accomplish when we stand firm on conservative principles and don't back down. Our administration was 4 years of consequence, 4 years of results. As we like to say, it was 4 years of promises made and promises kept. Now think about it. In 48 months, the Trump-Pence administration achieved the lowest unemployment, the highest household incomes, the most energy production, most pro-American trade deals, the most secure border, and the strongest military in the history of the world. We revived our economy. In those first 3 years, we saw 7 million good-paying jobs created. We became a net exporter of energy for the first time in 70 years. We held China accountable for years of trade abuses, brought jobs back to the U.S., and we reduced illegal immigration on our southern border by 90%. And in the face of the worst pandemic in a century, we launched the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And on the day we left office, we were vaccinating 1 million Americans a day. Operation Warp Speed was a medical miracle. You know, I'll always be proud of how the American people responded to the coronavirus pandemic. Our healthcare workers, our industries, our researchers. And our hearts will always be with families who lost loved ones over the past year, including some who may well be with us today or looking on. But it's important that we learn the lessons from this pandemic. We must never again be dependent on foreign nations for our essential healthcare supplies. And China must be held accountable for unleashing the coronavirus on the world. So we revived our economy. We rebuilt our military. And with that renewed American strength over our 4 years, we stood with our allies and stood up to our enemies. American armed forces defeated the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader without one American casualty. We isolated Iran as never before, withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. And it was this president and our administration who kept their word to the American people and our most cherished ally when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. And for all 4 years, we stood up for the timeless values that Americans of cherished faith and freedom hold dear. With the strong support of the likes of Lindsey Graham and Senate Republicans, I'm proud to report, we confirmed nearly 300 conservatives to our federal courts at every level, including Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. And every single day, we defended the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution. We ended the assault on the Little Sisters of the Poor. And the Trump-Pence administration enacted regulations protecting religious adoption agencies and foster care. And yesterday, the Supreme Court voted 9-0 to make it permanent.
It's near the Alamo.
That is a victory for the religious freedom of Americans for generations to come. And from day one, I couldn't be more proud to have served in an administration that stood without apology for the sanctity of human life. We reinstated the Mexico City policy, expanded it to ensure that American tax dollars could not be used to promote abortion around the world. We cut funding to the United Nations Population Fund. And it was probably my highest honor as President of the Senate to cast a tie-breaking vote to allow states to defund Planned Parenthood. With your support and your prayers, we made history. We made a difference. We made America greater than ever before. But how times have changed. In just 148 days, the Biden-Harris administration has unleashed a tidal wave of left-wing policies that threaten to wipe out all the progress that we made for a safer, more prosperous, more secure America. Democrats have been so busy advancing their liberal agenda, sometimes I feel like the left hand doesn't know what the far left hand is doing. I mean, think about it. They launched an explosion of runaway spending to the tune of $6 trillion and counting. They're proposing the largest tax increase in 50 years. They announced plans to cut funding for the military, but provide taxpayer dollars to pay for abortion. They ended construction on the border wall and canceled policies that had ended the crisis on our southern border. And literally in 5 months, they turned the most secure border in the world into the worst border crisis in American history. You know, when I was vice president, I visited our southern border. And yes, it's past time for our current vice president to go to the border, put our policies back into effect, and end the Biden border crisis today. And the truth is that this administration hasn't even stopped all that. They formed a commission to pack the Supreme Court with liberal judges who will erode our God-given liberties, freedom of speech and religion, and the right to keep and bear arms. They rejoined the Paris Climate Accord, reopened the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, President Biden has been so busy accommodating the sensibilities of European leaders that this week at the G7, President Macron said how great it was to have a U.S. president back as part of the club. Well, the only club I want a U.S. president part of is labeled USA. You know, President Biden's weak leadership abroad has had tragic consequences. Where our administration stood strong with Israel every single day, this administration all but abandoned our most cherished ally and set off the worst outbreak of violence in the Middle East in 7 years. They restored millions of dollars to the Palestinian Authority. They announced plans to reopen negotiations with Iran, and they remained silent as thousands of Hamas rockets rained down on the people of Israel. President Biden replaced strength with weakness, moral clarity with confusion, and loyalty with betrayal. If the world knows nothing else, let the world know this: America stands with Israel. And maybe one of the most troubling developments of the past few months has been the Biden administration's wholehearted embrace of the radical left's all-encompassing assault on American culture and values. Under the Biden administration, patriotic education has been replaced by political indoctrination. They abolished our 1776 Commission and authorized teaching critical race theory in our schools. Instead of teaching all of our children to be proud of our country, critical race theory teaches children as young as kindergarten to be ashamed of this country. Critical race theory is racist, pure and simple. And it should be rejected by every American of every race. The truth is, it's past time for America to discard the left-wing reflex to see systemic racism across our nation. As my friend Senator Tim Scott said so well, America is not a racist country. America is the most just, noble, and inclusive nation ever to exist on the face of the earth. And the United States military is the greatest force for good the world has ever known. And the men and women of law enforcement are heroes all, and should be honored and respected and supported every day by every American. You know, last August, at the Republican National Convention, I told the American people they wouldn't be safe in Joe Biden's America. Tragically, murders have now increased by more than a third in our largest cities. Democrat efforts to defund the police have set off a violent crime wave that's wreaking havoc on families all across the country. Black lives are not endangered by police. Black lives are saved by police every day in every state. We don't need to defund the police. We need to defend the police and put the lives of law-abiding citizens first of every race and creed and color. You know, it's amazing to think in 2020 Joe Biden actually campaigned as a moderate. But he's governed as one of the most liberal presidents in American history. I mean, even AOC said not long ago that he has, quote, exceeded progressives' expectations. And I want to tell you from my heart, I was out on that campaign trail. And I don't believe for one moment that's what the American people voted for in 2020. They did not vote for open borders, rampant crime, or giving away our prosperity or our freedom or our future. So the time is now for freedom-loving patriots here and across the nation to stand together and unite behind our proven agenda and win America back. And we have the winning agenda. We have the winning agenda. We're the party that stands for strong national defense, secure borders, law and order, free enterprise, America first trade, the right to life. And we're the party that has seen judges appointed who will uphold all the God-given liberties for which every American patriot has fought throughout the generations. Freedom of speech and religion, and the right to keep and bear arms. We stand with the men and women on the thin blue line. Our movement has been fighting to give every parent the right to choose where their children go to school, whether it's public, private, parochial, or homeschool. And our party will champion state-based election reform, defend the one person, one vote
First person today to say election reform.
And we will restore confidence of every American in every election, and we will never let Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer nationalize our elections in this country. And finally, we will be the party that cherishes our history, our heritage, and the heroes that made America great. We will not be silent in the face of cancel culture. Our movement will reject every effort to marginalize Christians and conservatives wherever it arises. We will expose religious persecution masquerading as a quest for equal rights. And we will demand that government agencies, our military, and our public schools reject critical race theory in all its forms. That's a winning agenda. It will unite our movement. And that's an agenda that will bring back majorities in 2022 and beyond. You know, a pastor told me once that everyone's under-encouraged. So I want you to leave here, after this long morning of speeches, encouraged. Because I'm more confident than ever that we are on the road to majority. And the fact is, we've seen this movie before. In 2010, I was in the Congress of the United States. We had a newly elected Democrat president, a Democrat majority in the Senate, and a Democrat majority in the House. Sound familiar? But conservatives came together. We rallied around a positive conservative agenda. And despite the frustrations of the defeat of 2008, we literally won 63 seats in the House of Representatives and retired Nancy Pelosi in 2010. We retired Harry Reid 2 years later. We won the White House 2 years after that. We're going to do it all again in the next 4 years. civil unrest, a divisive election, a tragic day at our nation's capital, and a new administration intent on transforming our country along the agenda of the radical left. But despite it all, it's this movement, millions of Americans dedicated to faith and freedom, that will march our country forward. And we will march forward united on the road to majority and victory for the American people. Because it's Americans who believe in faith and freedom who know we don't have to accept a future of economic decline and moral decay. We don't have to exchange the American dream for a socialist nightmare. Over the past 4 years, we proved that when we stand for the American agenda and don't back down, we can be a nation where everyone prospers regardless of race and creed and color. We can have a government that serves the people, not the other way around. And we can be a nation where every American is free to live and work and worship according to the dictates of their faith and conscience. So let's keep fighting the good fight as we run this race in the days ahead. And let's keep the faith. Let's keep faith with the ideals of our founders enshrined in the Declaration and the Constitution, defended by every patriot through every generation that's born the years. Let's keep faith with the 74 million Americans who stood with us against a hailstorm of opposition in the media from every day of our administration. And most of all, let's keep faith with Him.
I finished the first one.
Who has ever guided this great nation.
I finished the first one. There's like, you have to do all of them.
You know, as I close, let me say I had occasion last year to be reminded that even when it doesn't seem like it,
What's that?
God is at work.
Neil.
Last summer, I got a letter from a pastor
Oh, wait.
in Middleburg, Florida. He told me of a time many years ago that he and his wife were in seminary. They had just gotten married. And they were asked if they would organize a Christian music festival at Asbury Seminary where they were studying. The plans were to cancel it if they didn't do the work. And several of their friends told them, "You're newlyweds, it's a huge project, you should pass on it." But they prayed about it. He told me in his letter they decided to go ahead and spend the whole year organizing that event. They arranged for contemporary Christian bands, wonderful preachers who were there, but then he wrote to me that on the Saturday night, the culminating night of that Christian music festival, it was raining. And he and his young bride walked around the grounds, thinking it all had been for naught. And then in his letter he wrote me, "That's because I didn't know that a future Vice President of the United States would be giving his life to Jesus Christ that night." He wrote, "I cannot write that without tears. I couldn't read it without tears." I remember that night. I was sitting on that hillside. And it was like I heard for the first time the words that God so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son. That whoever might believe in Him. And I stood up and I walked down that hill, not out of a sense of intellectual persuasion, but because my heart was broken with gratitude for what had been done for me on the cross. I wrote that pastor back, and I actually had the opportunity to meet him. And I was able to shake his hand. Say, now I know who else to thank for that night in 1978. You know, in these challenging times, I think we do well to remember the words of the prophet Jeremiah. Words that have been over the mantle in our home now for 20 years. That read, I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope in the future. And my fellow Americans, I believe if we put our trust in Him, if we carry the message of faith and freedom and our values to our neighbors and friends, there's a hope and there's a future. Because God is not done with America yet. With all my heart, the best days for this one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, are yet to come. Now let's get to work. Thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless you.